Hello, everybody. It is Friday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined for our Penn State-Nevada and season preview. We're going to get into both of those things. I'm joined by Isaiah Maldonado, our Post-Gazette insider, also of the Daily Collegian. We're going to be talking about this Penn State-Nevada game. I think there's lots of intrigue around that, big national television audience on CBS. And then, what do we want to see from some of these other guys this season? We've talked about the receivers this week. We've talked about Drew Allar this week. We're going to maybe get into the running backs a little bit and maybe some of those guys on the defensive side. Isaiah, Penn State is a 44.5-point favorite, according to our friends at FanDuel. I'll tell you, what I want to do here is what do we both want to see from this game? Obviously, not a ton you can learn when you're such a projected huge favorite. Yeah. Unless things go poorly. But let's just assume they're not going to go poorly, that Penn State's going to win comfortably. In that context, what do we want to see? I'll go first. I want to see this offensive line, this veteran offensive line, dominate this opponent. I want to see explosive plays from Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen coming out of the gate strong. It was a struggle for those guys to get those big runs in 2023. We saw more of them in 2024. I think you want to see that train continue moving in that direction where, they're ending the game by halftime themselves, regardless of what Drew Allar and the passing game is doing, and possibly regardless of if the defense is having a hiccup or two on the other side.
Yeah, I definitely do think that once again, when you're playing a non-conference game, Nevada last year went 3-10. They didn't win a single game in Mountain West play. So in terms of just their production as a team, we know it's not going to be super high. We know that on paper, it shouldn't contend with us. So in terms of learning through trials and tribulations, ideally, it's not going to be in this game. But in terms of what we can see from this game, James Franklin spoke about having 6 or 7 guys on the offensive line that are game ready. So having the initial 5 that are going to be playing, but also getting in some of those other substitutes, switch them out and see if, a testament to if they really are game ready, to see even if those guys who aren't starting week 1, but are being told to us that we're going to see them play a lot of minutes and that they're going to play a lot of snaps. I want to see how they fare, even if it is against a Mountain West team and not a very good one at that. I think the main thing that I want to see is I want to see familiarity within the offense for the receivers. Obviously, we spoke about it on Wednesday that we have a lot of new guys: Kyron Hudson, Trebor Pena, Devonte Ross, a couple of the true and redshirt freshmen with Tyseer and Koby Howard. So all of them are going to be getting reps during this game. I want to make sure that every single one of them is accustomed and familiar with the system. And obviously against a Mountain West secondary and not a very good one, I'd want to see them be able to break away, create that space, have big play potential, and execute some big plays. I think especially for a player like Trebor Pena, who really just came in the summer, who hasn't had the same amount of time as everybody else, I want them to look comfortable within the offense.
Yeah, and I think, listen, we haven't talked much about the defense this week because I think it's partially because of the opponent, and you just have this expectation of what that's going to look like. But, it would be nice to see this pass rush without Abdul Carter be able to get after the quarterback a little bit. I'm going to talk about Dani Dennis-Sutton here as we get into our over-unders for the season. I think you want to see him pick up a sack or two, get off to a good start, get rolling downhill a little bit. And listen, you want them to put a lid on these receivers. I think there's been some questions from Ohio State fans I've seen chirping of Penn State picking up the Jim Knowles playbook that Caleb Downs was able to keep a lid on a lot of the aggression because he's such a great player for them at Ohio State, and that held Ohio State's defense back in the early part of the Jim Knowles tenure, was that they could be susceptible to the big play because they didn't have a Caleb Downs playing at that kind of dominant level. I want to see Penn State keep a lid on this opposing passing game, limit those big plays to the greatest extent possible. I think that's a good day for the defense, even if you give up maybe 14 points. If you don't get beat down the field by these types of guys, I think that's a sign that maybe you can avoid some of those issues that have been associated with Jim Knowles early in his tenure in some different places. Isaiah, let's get into these season over-unders for some of these guys we haven't hit earlier in the week. Let's start with the running backs. I'm going to set the over-under for both Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton at 1,100 yards because that would allow them both to overtake Evan Royster as Penn State's current all-time leading rusher. I think it's a pretty tall task. They both finished right around 1,100 last season. To repeat exactly that level of success, to hit exactly that number that Evan Royster did of just over 3,900 yards would be very impressive for these two. I'm going to go over on Singleton and just under on Allen, just because it's hard for any team to rush for that many yards in a season. Penn State impressively did it with the extended playoff run last year. If they get that far again, I think it gets a lot easier. If they don't, I think it's going to be difficult for those guys to both hit that number. So I'm going to go over on Singleton, under on Allen. What say you?
Adam, we're in the exact same boat. I think when you kind of look at it, I really like what I saw from Kaytron last year, averaging either exactly or just under 5 yards a carry. Very efficient whenever he got the ball. We actually saw kind of a decrease in terms of yards per carry from Singleton. But I do think at the end of the day that he's the more explosive back. And when it comes down to those big plays, that he's going to be the one to really kind of get the spotlight on him. I think there's also an argument for it to be inverse when Kaytron gets it and Singleton doesn't, because Singleton is used a little bit more as a dual threat. We've seen him catching balls out of the backfield. We've seen him continuously develop as a receiving threat as well. Kotelnicki said that both of them within the offseason have developed as passing threats. So maybe there's a world that both of them don't hit it. But I think to play it safe, just because of who Singleton is, who he was in 2023, that I'm going to give him the edge. I'll say he gets over 1,100 because I do think that Penn State is going to be able to make that deep enough run. And I can see Kaytron finishing right under, which would still be just a historic season for the duo.
Yeah, and I think Kaytron just does not have the ability to rip off a 70-yarder the way that Singleton does to kind of pad the stats that way. He's going to have to be so consistently good all season to hit that number. And listen, I believe he only missed it by a yard last season. So
yeah,
I don't want to downplay his ability to do it. I just think I think it's going to be difficult, especially if they decide to pull these guys back a little bit, as we saw them do with Saquon Barkley at different points late in his Penn State career, as he started looking to that pro future, limiting the tread on the tires to the greatest extent possible so that those guys can go into the draft. Maybe they're sitting out second halves a decent chunk of the time, and keeping themselves fresh and not just there to purely stat things up. So I think that's a facet that you have to keep in mind as well. Let's talk about these tight ends. Tyler Warren went for 1,100 yards last season. I don't think anyone on this team this year is going to get anywhere close to that number. I set the over-under at 800 yards for any of the three of Khalil Dinkins, Luke Reynolds, and Andrew Rappleyea. Did any of them hit that 800 number in your mind?
I just don't see it, honestly, especially because how much the entire group has developed. It was made it seemed like in media and in practice that because all three of them have developed so much, that there's definitely going to be a good amount of like sharing reps at that spot. So I think that only works against them even more in terms of one of them hitting that over mark. I think if one of them could come close, it would be Dinkins. But obviously we have yet to see what his passing threat and like his passing game as a receiving threat looks like. I believe last year he had like it was like in the late 100s, early 200s in receiving yards. Wasn't his role, so of course no like shade on him there. Much used more as a blocker. He's going to be a much bigger part of the offense this year. I could see him getting around like 650 potentially. That's kind of the mark that I have for him in my head. But in terms of that 800 mark, I think that's just high, especially when you think about everybody who's on the team, the new wide receiver room, Kaytron and Singleton. I think it's going to be a very balanced attack. So to have a tight end to come in and have anywhere near that kind of production when there's so many other mouths to feed, I think is highly unlikely.
Let's touch on the defense briefly. Abdul Carter, I set this number for him last year at 10. He went under it in 2023, goes over it in 2024 with 12. I'll set the same number for Dani Dennis-Sutton, who had 8.5 sacks last season. Do you think he gets over that number? Again, if they make an extended playoff run, that's still less than one per game. So I'm gonna say over with him. I think in that more elevated role, I think he's going to seize that and hit that number, even though 10 is not always the easiest number to hit in this defense, as we've seen from guys like Chop Robinson, guys who've gone on to get bigger numbers in the pros. Sometimes it's just a matter of what the defense is. But I guess we don't really know in terms of what Jim Knowles is going to do versus what Manny Diaz and Tom Allen have done the last few years. So I'm just going to say he was at 8.5 last year. He'll get to that 10 mark this year.
I'm with you. I mean, everything that we've seen from Dani Dennis-Sutton, like we know he's poised to take over that role from Abdul Carter. You're going to have Zariah Fisher on the other side. I think both of them are very talented, but I do think that with Dani kind of being in that role now to be the lead pass rusher and to be able to get to the QB, I think that's going to be I think the production is going to be just substituted completely. I think that Abdul Carter is obviously better. I think he's a phenomenal player. I'm a Giants fan, so I was very happy to see him go to my team. Just had to throw that in there. But I think Dani has the skill set needed to be able to match that production. And of course, to your point, we have to see how Knowles is going to utilize him. We need to see what that entire just kind of D-line and linebacker core is going to play in the defense. But on paper, just off of just everything we've seen him from preseason, being a preseason All-American, the hype around him in the Big Ten, I do think that he'll get over that 10 sack mark.
All right, let's get into the big ones, Isaiah. Over or under 10.5 season wins for your Penn State-Nittany Lions. I think that's the question. You're going to beat Ohio State. Are you going to take care of business like you have? That's been James Franklin's calling card. He beats the teams he's supposed to beat. Let's assume you get to 10. Do you get to that 11th? Do you beat one of Oregon or Ohio State? I'm going to say they're going to go 11-1, so I'm going to go over. I think they're going to lose in the shoe still. I'm going to believe that they'll be able to beat that team when I see it, when it matters the most. And maybe if you see them again in the playoffs, maybe it's a different pick for me if it's not in the shoe. But going to Ohio State, I'm going to say that's a loss. But I do think that they are better than this Oregon team. I believe the last time I looked, 4.5-point favorites on FanDuel. So they expect Penn State to win somewhat comfortably in that whiteout game at Beaver Stadium. You have the bye leading up to it. You've got these 3 should be fairly easy games. There's really no excuse, Isaiah, not to win that game. So I'm going over, and if it's under, then people I think are going to have a right to be upset with this team given the expectations that it has.
Adam, I couldn't have said it better myself, but I'm going to take it one step further. I'm going to say 12-0. I really want to believe in this team. I think when you look at, obviously, 10 games is, if you fall under that, that's just a failure of a season objectively when you look at our schedule. Oregon and OSU are going to be our 2 biggest games. I believe that we're going to be able to take it home in the whiteout against Oregon. I have complete faith in that. I really want to focus my attention on Ohio State. I think that there's a lot of questions around Ohio State right now. Losing Travion Henderson is going to be a big hit. Losing Igbuka is going to be a big hit. And more than anything, I don't have complete confidence at their quarterback position. I know that Julian Sayin is going to be the starting QB for the season, and I'm not sold. And because of that, just kind of having somebody so young and inexperienced running that offense is a very big question mark for me. At that point, I think that when you're matching up, and then also if you count the loss of Jim Knowles, I think that in itself is going to make their defense take a little bit of a step back as they continue to learn a new system, kind of figuring everything out the same way that we are learning a new system. But by the time that we play them, I do expect that those kinks should be mostly ironed out. I think it's going to come to a point of both are defensive-minded teams with stars on both sides of the ball. But when it comes to the offense, I'm going to have faith in Drew Allar to outperform Julian. And that's why I think that Penn State is going to go 12-0.
I've been saying that stuff about Ohio State since you were in middle school, Isaiah. Every year there's a new quarterback. Every year there's a guy they lost that left. Every year they're getting the defensive coordinator getting a big job, and every year they reload and beat Penn State. So, listen, I think you have solid theories, but I'm going to need to see it before I believe in that with Drew Allar, with James Franklin, with this Penn State team. That's no shade. I think there's still high expectations, but I'm not betting on it yet. Isaiah, let's wrap it up on this. How far does Penn State go in this college football playoff? I'll let you go first because I feel like I'm going to be the damper here. So go ahead and give me your pick for how far they make it this season.
Honestly, I might be the damper. If we're being honest, I could honestly see us, ending on another semifinals loss, or if like at the very best case scenario, I think we make it and we lose inevitably. I think when you have a team like Texas that's still in the running, you can never take away from Ohio State. I'm projecting us to beat them, but I do believe that it's still going to be, like you said, a team that is consistently able to bounce back. And I think that we're just, I don't know. There's a couple of questions that I have about the fit. I think on paper, Penn State's roster is extremely talented, but in terms of that postseason production, we spoke about this when we spoke about Allar yesterday, just his performance in those big games is a question. And until I see him perform, at least in the regular season, against a team that's comparable, like an Oregon, like an Ohio State, I need to see how he does in those moments. Maybe once the season is done and he's able to, effectively play against those defenses, potentially torch them, have 250 passing yards, 2-3 passing touchdowns, no picks. A performance like that would probably sway me. But as of now, I do think that a semifinals loss, at best a finals loss, is unfortunately where we draw the line.
I think this team is, if not Franklin's best, then it's his second best compared to that 2017 team with Saquon Barkley as a senior. Relative to the rest of college football, this is the best I felt about Penn State compared to the other teams on paper. So I think there is something to say for that. I want to know how the season unfolds in reality. And I think these SEC teams, I don't know if it's going to be Texas. I don't know if it's going to be Georgia. I don't know how Ohio State is going to gel. But there's so many of these teams that I could see Penn State falling short against that it's hard for me to say that they're going to beat them all and take the crown at the end of the season. So I'm kind of right there with you, Isaiah. I think another semifinal loss is probably the prediction that I'm going to make. Losing in that Final Four, maybe getting one playoff win. The question is, do you win the Big Ten? So I will predict that if they can keep Ohio State out of the Big Ten title game through some series of tiebreakers and are able to draw Oregon again after they beat them in the whiteout. It's hard to beat a team twice, but I think Penn State has a chance to do that, win the Big Ten. So I think I'll predict they'll win the Big Ten, but fall short against those teams that may prove to be buzzsaws by that point in the calendar when we have a long way to go till we get there. So I don't know who it's going to be. I don't really love Texas. I know you do. I don't know that I believe in them the way a lot of people seem to. Arch Manning has to prove it to me just the same way Drew Allar does, that he's going to make those plays in the clutch moments with the relative lack of experience compared to Drew Allar. So I'm not going to say the team I think they're going to lose to, because I think that's going to materialize, but I think they're going to be solid teams in their way. And I'll say it this way. I think they're going to play a better team in that semifinal game than they drew in Notre Dame a year ago. I think that's why it's going to be such a frustrating loss in context, because that was a team Penn State could beat, was a peer, and they didn't find a way to do it. I think you're going to have a tougher road than you had a year ago, certainly with SMU and Boise State in the early rounds. But also once you get to that Final Four, I think you're going to see a better team than you did in Notre Dame.
I agree.
All right. Well, that's the season preview, folks. That's the game preview. We will be right back here on Saturday. Isaiah will have his post-game stand-up from the field or wherever he can find a quiet spot at Beaver Stadium. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Make sure you like this video. If you enjoyed it, help us out in the YouTube algorithm. We'll talk to you again next week here on the podcast.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.